And hello everybody, welcome back to Flight Past. And in today's stream we are going to be talking, continuing our talk on Operation Tonga, but today we'll be talking about the assault on the Merville Battery. And what we're going to do is we can continue where we left off. The other day we were looking at the drop of Lt Col Terence Otway and his landing in the drop zone to the north of Merville. Drop zone Victor, and we showed there how difficult it was to identify the drop zone. And today I thought we'd carry on from there and but look instead to one of his officers in his headquarters called Major George Smith. Let me see if I can find this guy for you. This is Lieutenant Terence Otway, Lieutenant Colonel, sorry, and we are talking this guy here. This is Major George Smith. He's part of the headquarters company of the 9th Parachute Regiment, which is part of the 3rd Parachute Brigade, under I believe Brigadier James Hill, and they're all part of the 6th Airborne Division. He is this Major George Smith. He is part of something codenamed the Trowbridge Party, and it is a party. There's literally 3 of them in his group, and they're known as the BR Party, which stands for the Battery Reconnaissance Party. There was another party called the Taping Party, and there was also so there were 6 guys, and they flew in an Albemarle aircraft to Normandy in front of the battalion. There was another aircraft as well with another 6 people in it, and these contained the RV party, and they were the rendezvous party. So these are basically pathfinders and reconnaissance guys. So where we are now, we are flying in my trusted Cessna. This is the English Channel, and we're going to be heading towards Merville in northern France, which is just to the east of the River Orne. And this is where one of the drop zones was located, called Drop Zone Victor. If you're new to the channel, you can join in with the discussion on Discord. You can see the link in the profile, and just pop along, you can come down and you'll see D-Day, and you'll see a timeline here, and then you can see all the posts in the forum about what happens at what time on the evening of D-Day. And if you find Tonga or anything saying like Merville, you can click on that, and it will give you basically what I can read out to you here. So George Smith recalls that his RAF Albemarle aircraft, which is a twin-engine sort of medium kind of bomber thing, but it was converted, took off from RAF Harwell, which we discussed in a previous episode, and they took off at about 11 o'clock on the 5th of May. And the interesting thing when you read these guys' diaries is you get a lot of sort of conflicting messages and things. One of them was that he reports that the wind in England was pretty gusty at the time. He recalls that the largest branches of the trees were dancing up and down, so we're talking probably force 5, maybe force 4 or 5, 20-mile-an-hour winds. But he recalls that the meteorological forecast said that it would be calmer on the Normandy coast. So they didn't really believe this, but they thought they were just being told this to make it sound okay. There is reports that the RAF had decided to take off 9 minutes later than planned because there was anticipated tailwinds over the channel. So presumably this storm has come in, and once it's passed, it's now drawing air down from the north. So now as we're crossing the channel, we have a tailwind behind us. And so the RAF informed them that they were going to be taking off 9 minutes later because they wanted to make sure that they arrived exactly at 20 minutes past midnight on the 6th. So these little details you pick up from people's diaries. He also recalls being a little bit peeved because the RAF had decided, literally, it seems to be literally that day, the reconnaissance photos the RAF had seen had shown enemy dug in positions in the vicinity of where they were going to drop them. And now he says they were aware of these positions, but they didn't think they were being manned. But on the day, the RAF just decided that they weren't going to drop them where they were going to drop them. They'll drop them half a mile further. And he thinks this was something that the RAF shouldn't have been making the decision on, and that it was up to it was a military decision for the guys on the ground. But it seems to be on on D-Day there seems to be some sort of panicking going on. We heard it. You hear about these last-ditched decisions to give the guys these leg packs. Now the British had trained with them, but if you remember, Band of Brothers, they got these bags and they literally hadn't trained with them at all. So there seems to be a bit of panicking going on in the sort of planning stages. He talks about his equipment. We're just approaching the coast here. I'm just going to pause just whilst I just talk about the stuff they're carrying. He's got he talks about his haversack and his respirator. He's also got a pistol, entrenching tool, grenades, rubber gloves. Presumably, I don't know what that's for, but someone might be able to tell me. He's got a torch, binoculars, compass. He reports his map case being overloaded, and loads of stuff that he thinks is probably unnecessary. He says that the RV party, now presumably maybe they split the RV party up, so they might have two RV parties split into the two aircraft. Makes kind of sense. And then he has the Battery Reconnaissance in one aircraft and the taping party in the other. So he describes the kit that the RV guys have got, and that they were carrying these kit bags strapped to their legs, and these quick release bags. They were on a line. It was like a 20-foot line dangles beneath them, so it hits the ground and takes the weight off the parachuter's legs. So we're approaching here now. This is we've done this several times now. We'll leave it in the daytime this time, but so we can see the River Orne over there to the right. The beach on the far side is Sword Beach. We got Franceville Plage here on the right, and we've got Carlberg, and you can just make out off the left wingtip the River Deeves estuary. And this is the gap that we're going to fly through here between these two towns. And the Merville Battery is it's in this area here, and our drop zone is that sort of light patches of fields here. Now he talks about the preparations for jumping. He says that the navigator informs them that they're approaching the coast, and so they have to open the trap doors. These are doors that are in the Albemarle. It's they're underneath the aircraft. The Albemarle was built by Armstrong Whitworth. It's like a twin engine transport aircraft, basically. Kind of used sometimes in medium bombing. Used a lot for aerial reconnaissance. The Lancaster and the Halifax took over basically the bombing role. The Mosquito was doing the low-level stuff, so this wasn't so much used. But so it was used a lot in insertion flights. It was a aircraft that could slip into a bombing raid. You wouldn't really notice it in a bombing run. You could do a different mission to that. You could use the cover of those bombing runs if they wished. But so it has the hull in the floor, the bomb bay doors, basically. So they're told to get ready. They open these doors, and they talk about how with all the kit bags, normally what these people would do, they would kind of bunny hop down the fuselage and then drop out of the hull. But they had decided that the key factor in this drop was to stay together. And so they kind of all lined up in the hole at the same time, with George Smith in the middle. He's got his two supporting troops with him, and these were Company Sergeant Majors Miller and Harold. He says the coast comes into view. I just move it a little, just stop there for a sec. So he says the coast comes into view and they could see the bursts of flame. There's obviously some bombing runs. I think there was some bombing runs around about midnight. And they were targeting the beach defences. And they talk about passing over the coast at 700 feet, and we discussed in previous episodes the height that these guys jumped at, and when you hear the reports, it's always in that sort of range of sort of 600 to 800 feet. 500 feet was considered pretty low. The cloud base was at 2,000 feet. They described when coming across the coast, there's no flak that he could think of remembering, but he could see, with a minute to go, he could see tracer being fired up. He's doesn't remember too much about the tracer and the gunfire. He says he was just concentrating at this moment on the lights, and when the red light comes on, they're given a few seconds before the green comes on, and he jumps they're standing astride the hull basically, and all he has to do is close his legs, hold on to his harness, and then he just drops. And as soon as that happens, then Miller follows, and then followed quickly by Harold. And this is where they jump. So this is the drop zone Victor. Now, I want to just pause this drop about here, because George Smith says that the most important time for him as the Pathfinder, as it were, is to orientate himself whilst he's coming down. That's the very brief moment when he can have a good look around, see where he is, and get a good idea of whereabouts he's about to land. He describes his descent as perfect. He says that there wasn't much of a jolt on the canopy opening. He says he wasn't being fired upon, though he could see a tracer further away, and he believes it was still firing at the aircraft that they just jumped off. He describes at this time as well that there was no moon, and I'm not sure if that's right, because I would have thought the full moon would probably be out by now, but it might be that it was cloudier than he remembered, that the clouds were covering it. I'll have to check the actual times of the moonrise on D-Day. And he describes, obviously, the night vision coming in. But what's the important thing on his diary is he mentions that he could see a large building half a mile away, when he calls it half left, and another about 3/4 of a mile away, half right. Now, if we assume that he was facing forwards and he's when he's looking at the tracer and he can see it to go into the aircraft, then he's obviously facing south. And when he means half right, it suggests a 45-degree angle to that the direction of the aircraft. So if that's the case, what he says is that he identifies a building. The first building which he identifies as a large building half a mile away and half left, as being the Varaville headquarters, which was a German military headquarters, obviously he's been told about. And when we look at this this drop zone, this is Varaville here. We've got the church in the middle, and he says there's a large building. Now, these buildings aren't photogrammic, so they're just what micro soft flight simulator has placed in. But presumably, it's going to be in this direction and about half a mile. Well, what would we say would be half a mile? This is I mean, we're talking possibly about here, around about this. We're talking possibly this way, and that's half left. And then he talks about that he can see a building which was 3/4 of a mile away, half right. Now, 3/4 of a mile away is possibly this. These are the village. This is the village's Gonville. So if we then say, okay, half right, half left, half a mile closer to this one, we're talking probably this is likely to be where he landed. He describes the landing as a bit of an embarrassment to the paratroop training school. But he remembers, he was twisted. When he sat up, he punches the quick release thing, pulls off his leg straps on the parachute, and rips open his zip fastener on his jump jacket. Or pretty quickly. Within that time, he has time to realize no one's shooting at him, and very quickly he hears and he says this guy, Dusty Miller, the company sergeant Miller, had landed literally a few yards away. He describes it almost 4 yards away. Well, I mean, he was almost on top of each other then. So they were found together, and then within seconds, another shadow comes towards them, and it's Company Sergeant Harold. So these guys have landed, presumably, in this area, within 20 feet of each other, 20 yards of each other, which is pretty impressive. He describes how lucky they were because if, say, Harold or Miller had landed either side of a hedge, he says then you wouldn't know they were there, and it would be very difficult to meet up. He also describes that at the drop site there was very little wind, and so he said that he doffs his cap to the meteorological office, and that they got the weather forecast right. So it's interesting, those little snippets there. We always have this image in our head of these guys are landing or jumping out in a very windy conditions, and of course there's going to be different conditions in different places in Normandy, but it's not all that thing about, okay, there were strong winds, and so therefore sometimes when you hear these things about the drops being dispersed because of the wind, one it doesn't sound that it was particularly windy in some places, and two, they're jumping from 700 feet over a pretty big drop zone. This is the drop zone that we're looking at, which is this yellow fields, these wide fields here, this area, and over to this area here. So from 700 feet, even if you had a 20-mile-an-hour wind, you're not going to drift too far off, of course. So, sometimes there's something, a little bit of a miss there, and maybe the majority of the dispersion of the parachuters comes down to once they're down, not being able to orientate themselves, but also probably just errors in the actual RAF's dropping of the in place. So they land. It's 20 minutes past. Now his immediate thoughts was that he knew that there would be a bombing raid on the Merville Battery, and their initial intention was just to sort of spend those 10 minutes probably finding each other in the dark, getting themselves organized, and then waiting for the bombing raid to finish. It seems a bit silly that they didn't put the bombing raid in first and then put the guys in, but that seemed to be the order that it had to be done at the time. He describes that the battery is 2,400 yards away, and it's in this direction over here. So if we just remember where this is the battery here. And what he's saying is that there's going to be a bombing run, and the bombing run, they wanted to make sure that they were out of the peripheral area of it. But because they basically managed to get themselves organized so quickly, they're just tempted to go for it. They felt that because it was so far away that but think that they should be safe where they were. So they decide to just get going, and when they heard the bombers coming, they would then take cover. So they kept in the shadows of the hedges, and they said they did quite a good pace until they could hear the bombers come in. And they decided that they'd get into a ditch, and then it suddenly could hear these bombs falling. And what was happening, and what did happen, was well, first of all, he says he couldn't resist watching these bombs coming in, and he sees this large field in front of him, possibly this one here, and he says to the others, let's run across this field, whilst the Germans have got their heads down taking cover from the bombs. So they say they dart out across this field, and then they realise that the bombs are falling, well, not necessarily on Merville, but they were overflying and they were landing between, they say, Merville and them. So it's and that's basically in this area here. We'll learn as well that the RAF has basically overshot and dropped bombs in this area here. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if these dark dots here in this field are filled in bomb craters. You can sometimes see on just the ground, where they've been filled in, so there's a more sort of topsoil, and again you can see suspicious sort of circular dots that could possibly be where these bombs have overshot. So they're running across this field, and then the bombs start falling near them. And so they describe it as a sound like of express trains coming down, landing near them, and they threw themselves to the ground, and they clasped their hands around their backs to their necks, and they must have been trained on how to cover from these things, because he says specifically, he puts your hands behind your around the back of your neck, your forearms is pressed over your ears, and our elbows, they say, lifting our bodies slightly from the ground. So there must be something that they're trained to avoid the sort of concussion of the bombs. So he talks that this lasts 10 minutes. So let's just move the clock on. So the bombing raid was at past, and it lasts about 10 minutes. So we're about 20 minutes now to 1. There's also reports as well when that the village here of Gonville, the bombing had started some fires here. They once the bombing raid's finished, they get up and they run across the rest of the field, and they say they come to what is a track. He expected it to be a good road, but it just turned out to be a sort of a farm track. And he believes that it's the correct road that they were looking for, but the reconnaissance photographs had exaggerated it, and it could possibly be this road here. At this point, they move along the hedge, and they come across the Batman of Major Allen Parry. His name was Private George Adset. Adset and Major Allen Parry, they were part of the RV rendezvous party. And it's at this point that he points out to George Adset what he believes is the RV point. So he instructs him to make his way there. And when he gets there and he meets battalion, to leave a message to say that the battalion recce party has landed safely and they're now pushing on to do their job. So in this area here was the recce, the RV point. Now, we can talk about where that was, but I believe it's somewhere in this area here. It's described as well as having like a tree, a very bushy tree on a bank with a ditch. So when you're down, you can't quite see it, but the area where we've come from is actually lower than this, and we've actually come up a slope. So when you're down here and you've landed and you're trying to orientate yourself, obviously you'll probably have a compass, but there is a slight rise, as you can see, towards the objective. You've got the village here, so it would kind of make sense that your rendezvous point might possibly be at the eastern side of Gonville, near a road, near a crossroads, So I've been putting it together, a map, and this is it here. And where we are right now is basically where that says RV on the bottom right hand corner. And the battery is over there. So George Adset then has gone off to the RV. He we can talk about Allen Parry's adventures later, but he remembers when Adset had already been at the RV when he got there. And so George Smith then carries on. They talk about... It gets a little bit of confusion about where he goes. But he talks about a hedge. The next hedge junction we met was thick. So I think I don't know whether this is a modern part of the village or not, but he talks about he's heading up basically to this point here. Now, on my map, this point is that the firm base. So I believe that there's an RV point that funnels all the people to an RV point, and then the RV point moves up to this place, because from this point on, we then get into the defenses that surround this battery, which is here. Okay, so George Smith is pushing forward. And he talks about pushing through fences, then realizing it's quite noisy. He remembers almost falling into the lap of two Germans somewhere around here, and just not engaging them, knowing he's disciplined to know that he can't get into a fight with these guys. He's literally got to back away and keep pushing to his objective. He talks about crossing some open country. He talks about 600 yards of open country, which he was going to go across on a compass bearing, but then realizes there's minefields that hasn't been identified. He also describes in this area here finding Rommel's asparagus, these posts dug into the ground. He says trying to go across the field, presumably somewhere in this area. He comes across two posts 30 yards into the field, 15 feet apart, very solid, dug in, well into the ground. And between, and this is something I didn't know, but he describes that there was a wire that stretched between these two posts. They started at a height of 6 feet on one post and ending at 3 feet on the other. So this is, when you're in one of these Horsa gliders, this is head height. This is, if you go into these, trying to avoid the posts and you hit this wire's just going to cut straight through your Horsa glider, literally at sort of head height. He describes the wire as being too thick as well for it to be cut. So, but when we hear about some of these Pathfinder guys jumping down to clear these things, these are the things that they're blowing up. Okay, so he's at this point he says they were very nearly across the open ground, and when they could hear the flak guns begin to fire, and I'm going to guess he's in this area here, and he looks up, and presumably from this direction where we came from, he spots these dark silhouettes of the Dakota aircraft coming in, and they keep coming in for about 15 minutes, and from what I can determine, this is means it begins at sort of 1:45. We know from Major John Howard it was about 10 to 1. So let's say it begins at sort of 10 to 1, 15 minutes, and then he says these Dakotas arrive, and they're carrying the rest of the battalion are coming in. He recalls thinking that they were ranging from 500 to 1,500 feet. And then he sees this, he says all this tracer fire then fires up towards these shapes, and he, where he is, say in this area, he then can pick out all the positions of the machine guns firing. So he describes how he couldn't see many parachutes falling because of the dark. Sometimes he could spot them for a few seconds. But what he could do, though, was see these the points where these machine gun nests are. He could spot the ones that are in his vicinity and the ones around him, and that allowed them then to change their route around them. He then talks about reaching what's known as cross tracks, and one that led directly to the outer perimeter of the battery. This here, I believe, is what they call the firm base, and I think what he's talking about is these sort of cross-track kind of here, and this is the one that goes to the battery. He says the battery was the outer perimeter of the battery was about 600 yards away. So, probably. So he describes the area as being open, which it still does here. A small hedge with a ditch alongside it. As you say, he wanted to cut across on a compass bearing, but he decides not to because there's minefields that haven't been identified. And he could spot these minefields because the RAF had missed its target. The bombs had fallen into the minefields around it, and then he could see these lines of explosions in the ground where they had laid them in lines. He talks about how they were trying to get to a position that they called Wood 2. Now, I'm not particularly sure where that was. It could have been some of these groups of trees. Probably not even there now. When they get to the this area, they start to, they leave one of the guys behind, and then two of them move forward, and then they start recceing the area. We can see here, this is the direction of the main gate, as you can see on the map at the top, and this route across here was the main assault route into the area. When he gets here, he actually finds that it's very quiet, and that troubles him. He's not even sure if anyone is there. So he does a recce where they're crawling through these minefields. They're cutting the wires. They're leaving a trail, and they're to lead them back, to lead the assault group through. And he pushes on. They split. The two of the guys, Miller and him, crawl around on the inner, near the inner wire, just to try to find the best places to enter. He describes not being worried about the anti-tank mines because he didn't think his weight would trigger them. And they find different patches of wire that are thicker than others, and mark it down. He then decides that he's probably seen enough here. He observes some of the, when he gets to observe these guys firing at stuff. He talks about how an aircraft towing a glider comes across, and that gives him the ability to spot where certain machine gun positions are in the battery. So he says, this is his words, he says, almost simultaneously 4 machine guns inside the battery open fire with tracer, aiming at this glider, which the glider and the aircraft carrier are flying straight. He recalls a 20mm flat gun nearby, and so he just sits still and watches all this. So at this point he decides that he's seen enough, that he knows that the battery's occupied, he's got a good idea of his defenses, and so he decides to pivot round, come back, and crawl out of the position. He's now trying to hook up with the taping party. So he's gone ahead. He's identified these places where they can use these Bangalore torpedoes, the long tubes that you can shove underneath the wire. And it's the job of the taping party now to mark a path from the firm base to the point where they do the breach. He moves. He comes back and he grabs. He leaves. This time he leaves Miller in this area. So he's always informing the people in his team of what he's seen. He's never keeping his team all together. So if one part of the team is taken out, that the information can be passed on. So he's told Miller now, or Miller was with him, so Miller was one of the guys doing the recce's. He's now taking Harold back with him. So he's going back with information. Miller's got information back up here. As he says, he's sliding back down the lane. He comes across a guy, Captain Paul Greenway, and he is part of the taping party. There's a little bit of confusion about some mortaring that possibly is going on. They talk about the Germans shelling the cross track, so I'm not sure whether they already knew their place, but it's a bit weird. Something I'll have to have another look at. But he says when he came back this way, he gets to the firm base, and the battalion's not there. And he starts to get worried because time was getting short. I'm not certain of what time we're talking about now. I think we're talking possibly around about 2:30 by now. It's always very difficult because you can never tell which time they're using. There's a summertime GMT. There's double summertime. So this is known as firm base at the near to Gonville, which is this village here. But once he gets here, I mean, it's around about 2:30. We know that, and we'll talk about it later, with that Otway gets to his RV at around about 2:30, and he pushes on. So I think 2:30 is probably about the right time. He says that it doesn't take him long to meet up. He says he doesn't have long to wait, and then he could see the head of a column, presumably coming up this road. coming up here, and he says they remained in cover, and then whispers the password, which I think in this section it's Punch and Judy. They also had little duck whistles, I believe. He then reports that Lieutenant Colonel Otway wasn't too far behind, and he provides Otway with some of the better news he's had so far, which is basically that that he didn't believe there was any surprises up ahead. And he's instructed by Otway to lead the battalion, and so he turns around and then moves this way to the starting off point. So at this point, I think it would be good then to leave this stream for now, and when we do the next stream, we'll pick up on. Well, actually, we could just do Parry's. Story. So we are talking about this guy. So he this guy is part of his name is Major Allen Parry. He's the son of the Canon Alan James Parry, and his brother was Captain George Parry, who was the chaplain for the 7th Parachute Battalion. And if you can remember back to our discussion on the Pegasus Bridge and the defense in Benouville, he was the chaplain who was killed trying to defend a regimental aid post that was overrun. So this guy, he dropped on Drop Zone Victor with the and he was tasked to be the pathfinder and the sort of the rendezvous organizer for the Drop Zone Victor. He used a red Aldis lamp, which could signal to people around and to the planes coming in the position. of the rendezvous and the drop zone. They landed in drop zone Victor. He remembers having a problem with his kit bag and struggling with it as he's coming down. He remembers hearing bullets coming around him as he's dropping, but none were actually destined for him. When he lands, in this area, he finds it very difficult to orientate himself, presumably because the difference between him and George Smith is that George Smith is looking around, sees Varaville, sees Gonville, gets a good location. But Parry, because he's struggling with his bag, fails to notice where he is. And that's the difference between knowing where you are and not knowing where you are. He remembers that very soon after landing, he has no idea where he is, but he hears a rustle and he whispers punch, and he gets the reply back, Judy. And he joins up with two Canadians who are lost. Now these are probably Canadians who are the pathfinders for the Canadian drop, so they're lost too, and this might explain why quite a lot of the drops are going wrong for the Canadians later. He remembers, so they dropped at the same time, 20 minutes past. He says that by 1 o'clock he's getting agitated because he hasn't made it to the RV. He's moving through the drop zone area, and he's picking up more and more people. So he has about 12 with him. And then he says he sees a red light, which was being held by Lieutenant Joe Worth, who was the battalion's intelligence officer. He moves towards it, and he comes across a Sergeant Eastley. He's waving his torch. And then there's the second in command, Eddie Charlton, and Captain Hudson. So he gets to the RV, and he realizes that there's basically hardly anybody there. So it's been 40 minutes since the drop. We're talking. We're talking about 1 o'clock. Let me just change this. And we're at Gonville, and this is the what I believe is the location for the RV point. It makes sense that it's in this area somewhere. At this point, he meets up with his Batman, and if you can remember, his Batman was the guy that George Smith bumped into. Who was Private Adz. He gets out this his oldest lamp at this point, and goes up this tree and starts signaling to. I think he's signaling to everybody, really. I think they may be signaling mainly to the drop zone to say, look, this is the RV point. And he possibly might signal the planes coming in, but I think this is mainly a red lamp to guide people in. And so now we're waiting here. Now we're waiting for Lt Col Otway to arrive, and he arrives at around about 2:30. And when he arrives, he's given the information by his second in command, who basically tells him that this is Charlton. He tells him that the amount of people they've got is only about 50. So of the 600 men that have jumped in, only by 2:30. Now, I get confused here whether it's 2:30 British sometime, double time, or whatever. It's either 1:30 or 2:30. There's different reports. It depends who you hear. But even so we're talking maybe an hour or 2 hours. And especially when you listen to George Smith's account, his account sounds like it would probably take 2 hours to do. Anyway, so by this time, there's only 50 men arrived. And when Otway then decides that he's got to get on with the job, but there's reports that the men it's increased maybe to between 110 and 150 people. So the amount of men he's now attacking with is going to be less than what is expected up at the battery.
Clear to land runway tree 1, FLP 1944.
So we've got to the point then where Otway's arrived. He's informed of the lack of men, and then he's also informed by Charlton that the gliders hadn't arrived. So there was 5 gliders. They were due to land, I believe, probably about 1:30, 1:35 It might be 12:35 again. I'm not sure. It's that sort of confusion about the time. These gliders, the towing aircraft reported that when they were crossing the English Channel, they hit a squall. The squall meant that the towing line had become disconnected, and they went down in the sea, and they were never seen again. Which I find immensely sad. You know, that there's something about soldiers dying in combat before actually being able to fight that is, you know, or dying by an accident in combat is incredibly sad. These gliders, they were going to be carrying the heavy equipment and supplies. They had 6-pounder guns on them. There was some anti-tank guns. They had 3 jeeps, but more importantly for Otway, they were carrying scaling ladders and Bangalore torpedoes. Otway recalls, he said, I had no radio sets working, I had no engineers, and he had no medicals. He had damn all, really. And it occurred to me, yes, do I go ahead or do I not? And I'm not line cheating on this. The first thought that went through my mind was, how on earth could I face my friends if we did not go ahead? So we went ahead. I was committed. I felt, well, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. There's nothing I can do about it now. So I suppose it would be true to say I went on and put all thoughts of failure out of my mind. It was a question of move off or give up. And in the parachute regiment, giving up is not an option. So we shall leave this here for today. We've just gone over an hour and 20 minutes. Just like to leave you with something which is always kind of reported in this thing. The stress that this Otway guy was on is immense. And I remember he talks about the importance, I suppose, at this moment of his Batman. It's almost like a valet that these officers had. They tend to be sergeants. They tend to be sort of salt of the earth kind of guy. He talks. He remembers talking to him, and if I can just find. Just find where he spoke. This is it. So he turns to his Batman, which was Wilson, and says, "What the hell am I going to do, Wilson?" And he turns around and says, "There's only one thing you can do, sir. There's no need to ask me." And he just said, "You're right. What else can I do?" I think he, at this point as well, offers him a glass of whiskey in a sort of a waiter kind of on a silver plated tray kind of gesture, and that's it. Now, we know we now turn to the actual assault itself. So I'm going to leave you with the position that they got to. So on the picture, they're down in the bottom right hand corner where it says firm base, and I believe it is this area here. And so in the next episode, we'll start off with the actual assault at Merville from this position. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Remember, you can join up on the Discord and ask any questions and add any facts you have. If you have any questions, just leave it below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.